Now we come to the stitching. I've got, actually I haven't, I'm going to get an applique needle. So one of our Hugs and Kisses applique needles, and some fine 60 weight thread. This is actually a blue shade, which is probably not optimum, but you'll see that if the stitch is correct, you shouldn't see it anyway. So I'm threading and knotting. And for our applique stitch, it's just a standard blind invisible applique stitch. So we come up through the back and just through the fold of the fabric where it's been wrapped around the edge of the paper. Just here, through the edge of the fold. Then we're going to go straight back down, but just through the background. If I can come a little closer. So straight back down, but just through the background. Come along and just get that fold of the fabric again. And pull straight back down. Move along. Catch the fold of the fabric. And then as you pull it through, give it a little tug, and the tiniest bit of the thread that's came straight up and straight down will just sink into the weave of this fabric, and you won't see your stitches at all. Now if you're going through a layer below, don't think that you have to go all the way through to this background fabric. You just need to catch the top layer onto the layer below it. So I can just go through that one. Then when you get to just one piece, you're going to go through to the background. And on the back of your fabric, you should pretty much have like a back stitch, a solid row of stitching, because you've come straight up and down on the front and you've moved along on the back. Now I like to stitch from, I'm right-handed, from right to left, and I like to stitch towards the piece that I'm appliquing, so towards it like this rather than away into it. I find that gives you much more control. My thumb can be holding down the piece and having total control of it, so it's not flapping around, and I know that when I come up to catch the edge fold, that I've got that sitting nice and tightly, and my needle's just going to poke straight through that little fold and go exactly where I want it. So I'm stitching in an anti-clockwise direction in this case, because I'm stitching from right to left. That's the natural way I hold my needle, and I'm stitching either from right to left or towards myself, but towards the applique piece. Okay, I'm scooping into it rather than trying to scoop away into it. I just haven't got the same control of that piece there to have it where I want it to be, and for my needle to go exactly where I want. And this is just what I find the best way to get a real rhythm going, and you'll have this stitched down in no time. So as I go through to the back, yes, I do prick my finger underneath, just enough to feel it before I scoop back up. And you'll notice I don't use a hoop for applique like you do for embroidery. I want that fabric to be able to move around with every stitch. And I want to get right in there close, so I've got control of getting just that edge fold of the fabric where it's wrapped around my paper template. So I'll continue along till I get back to the start position. Making sure I'm just catching the fold. And I get back to the beginning. So now I can continue on and stitch around my first petal. Actually, I'm not quite to the beginning. Okay, Now I'm here at the beginning, so I'm going to turn my work so I've got control, I'm going in the right direction. I can pinch in that piece there so it's not flopping around. I've got total control with my thumb there. And I can continue around. Just want to show you finishing off your thread on the back when you're appliquing. When you're doing turned edge applique, I'm using a fine applique needle and a fine strong thread, so a 60 or an 80 weight thread. And I've come to the back, and first of all, if you can see this, if you've watched my little video on the stitch we used, I mentioned that on the back your stitch is almost like a straight line, because on the front you're going straight up and straight down and moving along on the back, so you should have like a back stitch on the back. It's a bit hard to see because I've got a blending thread, grey on a grey thread. You might be able to see that. Okay, so when we're finishing, we're coming to the back, and I'm looking at where my applique piece is, not where just my background fabric is. I want to do my tie off into the back of this applique piece. So I actually make a loop with that thread. If you can see that, sorry. So I've made a loop, and then I take a little stitch under the loop, and the needle comes up inside it. And that's tying a knot just there. Do that twice. So I've made a loop, and then I'm going a little stitch through the background fabric, coming up inside the loop and pulling it tight, and then I just trim my thread off and I'm done. And that knots very tightly. It doesn't go through to the back, it doesn't pucker it, and you'll never see it on the front, and your stitches won't come undone. So that's how to end off your thread.